Greetings, what about ye? Well, that's another 12th over without too much grief. Though, my cheeky contention that class plays an integral part in our cultural difficulties, that elicited no end of comment. Now, if you weren't watching last week, why not? I'd argue that marches, flags and bonfires invariably only happen in working class areas, leaving the leafy suburbs of the Malone Road, Antrim Road and places like Cultra and Hollywood bereft of such festivities. Now, well, this annoyed many, as always, much to my amusement. One such was a guy who pointed out that, in fact, there is bonfires in Hollywood and flags on lampposts. I replied, you may be right. And guess what? That proves you've just driven into where the staff who work in the big houses in Hollywood live. Plus, is bonfires? Couldn't resist. Anyway, I also argued last week for understanding and mutual respect regarding Orange Order and its parades and whatnot. And what did they go and do? What did the Orange Order go and do within days of my magnanimity? Instead of rising to the challenge of mutual respect and understanding, they forced the cancellation of a children's cross-community sports event in County Down because, wait for it, it included kids from a GAA club. I'm convinced that there are racist rednecks, right, in the southern states of America, sitting out in their porches playing their banjos, and they hear about this, and they go, now, them boys over there, they're way too sectarian. They're way too sectarian, them boys. There's been a lot of poo-ha about the Orange Order only made that statement after the cancellation. Let's just say, we can sort of agree that probably the same people were involved, right? Because North Down Cricket Club in Comber, which had organised, to their credit, the event for young people from different backgrounds. And I mean, think about that. How radical is that in 2025? Like, how radical is that? Getting children from different backgrounds together. Well, the local Orange Order, it argued that there were concerns about the perceived move of the GAA into the local community. It said those concerns had come from some local residents. Let's remember here, people, we're talking about children playing together. And just who are these local residents? All we can say for certainty about them is that we know they're gutless, faceless, sectarian bastards who need to get into a time machine and go back to where they belong, the 1950s. Now, I come at this from a somewhat unusual perspective. As I, being me, I broke the rules from the other side, right? When I was 16, 17, whatever it was, I started playing for Cook Rugby Club. I was at that time also playing for Pearse's GAA Club. Now, while the rule banning GAA members from playing other sports, well, that had been lifted in 1971, it was still frowned upon. It was still frowned upon back in the days when I was playing GAA and rugby. I discovered this one day when I ran out onto the pitch in West Belfast playing for Pearse's, mistakenly still wearing my rugby boots instead of my football boots. The guy marking me spotted this immediately and came up to me in a somewhat threatening fashion. And he says to me, hey, Paul, here, you need to take our boots off. You need to change our boots, son. Fortunately, at that particular time, I was coming into my prime as a powerlifter. So instead of being intimidated, I placed my nose right against his and told him that if he didn't disappear, he'd need an enema to get my boots out of his hole. To my shame, I also made sure he was carried off the pitch later in the game. I know. I wasn't always this lovely person you see before you today. And in some ways, that's my point. Until I joined Cook Rugby Club, the only Protestants I had ever encountered as a wee boy growing up on New Lodge Road had been wearing uniforms. Right? They were either British soldiers or RUC men. And indeed, the year I joined the Cook Rugby Club, there were only me and one other Catholic in that team. Not once were we made to feel anything but accepted and welcomed. And that acceptance, I have no doubt, is partly responsible for the wonderfully liberal individual I eventually became. This place will never be right until our children are allowed to play together and go to school together. The fact that we still operate a system of sectarian education is unbelievable. and a disgrace. And those who push for that to continue, such as the Protestant and Catholic churches, need to take a good look at themselves. For make no mistake, boys and girls, what bigots on all sides fear is that if children meet and mix and play together, then their sick, twisted views won't just be undermined, but washed away with the laughter of those children. In the small Galway town of Tuam this week, the disinterment of the bodies of 796 babies and children will begin. Now, many of those small bodies were, believe it or not, discarded in a septic tank. This made all the more perverse when you consider that the name Tuam is derived from the Latin term for burial mound. These children had been under the loving care of an order of nuns called Bon Secours, who operated an institution for unmarried mothers and their babies. Now, this was a time in Ireland when to have a child outside wedlock was viewed as not just a sin, but a moral outrage. The nuns ran a workhouse where the mothers were incarcerated until their babies could be sold off or moved on to what they viewed to be respectable families. Or, sadly, in the case of the 796 children in that septic tank, they died in that institution and were dumped like pieces of trash. Now, there is a hero in this story, thank God. It's local historian Catherine Corliss, who discovered the scandal and spent years working tirelessly to ensure, as she said, the discarded babies were given a name and a voice. And this latest scandal for the Catholic Church proves yet again that while power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Tuam is not unique. Every Catholic graveyard in the country has a small green mound under which babies lie, buried without ceremony. Their sin, they died before they could receive the sacrament of baptism. Indeed, it is believed that over 400 babies lie in an unmarked grave in Milltown Cemetery in Belfast. Then Bishop Nolan Traynor gave assurances that the area where the babies lie, the bog meadows, was sacred ground and would remain untouched. It is presently, today, being dug up to make room for more graves. We can but assume that the allure of £4,000 per grave was just too much for the church to resist. Hold the front page! At least in the Irish News, where stories must be very scarce indeed. For this week, we had an example of stating the bloody obvious. It occurred when SDLP councillor Carl White announced to the world with great opprobrium that he had discovered that Belfast city centre was awash with discarded needles used in the use of illegal drugs. This is what Carl had to say.
We're a couple of 100 metres from Belfast city centre, and just behind me in this car park, there are discarded needles and other drug paraphernalia. And it's clear for anybody walking around the city centre, you see people suffering from both drugs and alcohol addiction. That's because of a failure from the Department of Health and the Department of Justice over many years now to tackle a problem that is actually sitting right in front of us for anyone that walks through Belfast city centre. The question about a drugs consumption boom, I was dubious about that previously. I think people are nervous about the idea that you could legally inject what are illegal substances. But I think
he says all this as if he's discovered this, as if nobody knew about this until he got out of his car. Seriously, I was writing about this in the same newspaper years ago. And Brian Smith, Councillor Brian Smith from the Green Party, has led the crusade to do something positive to remedy the situation. That councillor's been working on it for years. Now, the punchline for me was when Councillor White admitted that he had been against the only viable solution to the problem, namely the adoption of a safe consumption room for Belfast. So, Councillor White, instead of attempting to make yourself appear relevant by jumping on an issue others have been working on for years, a bit of humility on your part wouldn't go amiss. Firstly, you could admit that it's taken you far too long to waken up to the issue. Then you could apologise for objecting to the only rational solution proposed by Councillor Smith many years ago, namely a consumption room. Now, I was beginning to think elections were coming up, because that's usually what happens when elections are coming up. Councillors jump up and let on that they've suddenly discovered something that everybody's knew about for years. But here's the truth, people. I've said this before. Drug addiction isn't a disgrace. It's a disease. And until we accept as a society that it's a health issue and stop wasting millions treating it as a criminal issue, we'll never have the resources to go after the real scum, namely the drug dealers, rather than the drug users. I don't know about you, but I noticed this week an influx, an invasion of mainly Americans wearing gaudy clothing, right? Travelling into the northern regions of the province. Plane loads of them have invaded, seemingly to watch other individuals wearing more expensive gaudy clothing hit a very small ball into a hole far, far away in a game they call golf. I don't like golf. I agree with the man who said golf is a good walk spoiled. And I'll tell you why the reason I don't like golf. It is a dangerously addictive sport. Yes, I have played it on a couple of occasions. Now, not in the Royal Portrush Golf Club, but at a wee pitch and putt course not far away. Now, this being 9-hole course, being adjacent to the sea, meant that the vast majority of my balls the fish ended up playing with them. Do you understand? But I found on every time I went out, there was one particular ball, where through pure luck, I hit it right smack in the middle of the club face. It made a unique, distinctive bing as it soared majestically into the air, where it seemed to hang for eternity before falling gracefully onto the green a matter of feet from the hole. Like someone who just had their first hit of cocaine, I knew at that very second that if I didn't stop right away, my life was going to be a misery. I knew I'd be cursed like so many thousands of others to spend my days vainly searching for that elusive ping shot. So I did the only sane thing. I never held a golf club again. But before even the competition started, there was uproar. It's so here, right? When it was revealed that the Ramore restaurant in Portrush had put up their prices ahead of the tourists arriving. Disgusted of North Coast. Well, they were all up in arms. Why? I say fair play to the Ramore. It's a one-off chance to get a few quid in to help them through the dark days and nights of winter. So why shouldn't they stick on a few quid to the price of their burgers? It's not as if the big fat Americans, visitors, they can't afford it. Indeed, they'd probably prefer to pay more, believing that, like most Americans, that expense equals quality. Anyway, here. Money raised its head again when the list of the BBC's highest paid presenters came out during the week. Now, while some were outraged that Stephen Nolan was once again in the top 10 highest paid talent. Right? Now, there he is. We've been Nolan there. He's on $405,000 a year, just below Fiona Bruce and above Laura Kuenssberg. I, for one, say well done, that man. Well done. And as for the begrudgers, they suffer from one of humanity's most infantile emotions, jealousy. It's only jealousy. And before I get the expected, "Oh, chick, you're only saying that because you want to get on his show," I will have you know I have been invited onto the Nolan show twice. And I have refused twice. Not because I think there's anything wrong with the show, it's just I'm a grumpy old shite who says no to 90% of what is offered to me. Now, I can understand why people may not like the Nolan show, but that is not the same as being so blinded as to not recognise that Stephen Nolan is brilliant at what he does. Indeed, it never fails to amuse me that those who criticise him the most are the very same people who'd never miss his shows. See, what I believe the problem is, in this part of the world, we have a perverse attitude to success. We don't like it. We don't trust it. Nor do we trust those who achieve it. Well, here's the reality. Nolan works harder than pretty much anybody I have ever known. And I, for one, congratulate him on his success. And no, I won't be going on his show. This week, 16-year-olds were finally told they're going to get the vote, curing a glaring injustice, considering that at the same age here, you're allowed to either marry or join the army. Though marrying and joining the army is not that different. No, I'm leaving it there, leave it there. They could do that, but they couldn't elect their political representatives. And there's much debate as to whether or not this will impact who gets elected. Well, research done in countries where voting for 16 has already been adopted, it hasn't made much of a difference. Not really, no difference. And I know the reason for this. Because the reality is, 16-year-olds will vote how their parents tell them to vote. I'll be watching you, son. I'll be watching you. I'll be in no shade watching you. You better not vote, lads. You better not vote, lads. There was uproar when it became known that both the Tory and Labour governments had used a super injunction to block the fact that a mistake by an unnamed official had led to the release of the names of thousands of Afghans who had worked with the UK army when they were fighting in Afghanistan. Now, the names were in a spreadsheet. Shit you not, you heard that right. They were in an ordinary Excel spreadsheet that somehow made its way into the public domain. When it's been sent to somebody, it gets sent to somebody else. We've all hit that button, haven't we? Well, this has led to thousands of those who were named on that spreadsheet. Well, they had to be relocated to the UK at a cost that's estimated at over £400 million. We pay for that. See, you and me, we pay for that. Now, there was more embarrassment for the Defence Department when it was announced that not only had the details of Afghan helpers been leaked, but the details of 100 UK special forces and spies had also been released in the same data breach. What? You're not telling me they've only gone and told the Taliban the address of James Bond? Shock, horror, shock. I don't know about the rest of you, but see, as soon as I heard this story, I had a terrible feeling of deja vu. For it wasn't that long ago that exactly the same thing happened here. Remember when some dick released online the names and addresses of every cop in Northern Ireland? So anyway, at that time, as I usually do at my end of year show, I commented on the fact, right? So I'm going to put up here a shorter version of what I said. The longer version is kept for my Patreon friends. If you'd like to join them, you can see the whole thing. And then, we had the name, the home address, and the station every police officer in Northern Ireland works in. Sand. Oh, fuck. Control out delete. I remember the old days. Remember the goal, if you want to find out about some of the cops, you either go up the special branch, you either go to Castlereagh. It was like fucking Mission Impossible. You get over the fence, you tie up a guard, you get to the final cabinet, you open the file, find the file you want, you get the file, you go over, you get over the fence and you get away. Now, sand. Fucking sand. So burn, fuck. And that's what's going to cost us 240 million. 240 million. We pay for this. We pay. This is a level of fuckwittery that can only be summed up thus. This is the only way you can sum this up. Another common denominator between the Afghanistan and PSNI leaks is that, to the best of our knowledge, nobody has been held to account for either disaster. Proving yet again my theory that accountability is only for us plebs. The higher up you raise the ladder, go up, climb that greasy ladder of power, the greater your immunity. You know what this means? The wally. Sand. Right? And put people's lives at risks. They could be still sitting in front of that same computer today, hitting sand. Woo! Sweet dreams. You'll do nothing. You hear me? You'll do nothing.